By day, I'm tinkering with engines at the shop, but at night, I work as a bouncer at the Moonlight Bar. The bar job keeps me sane, because if I don't stay busy, my temper gets the better of me. That's where, amid the hum of the crowd and the smell of spilled beer, I first met Logan Wells. And that moment is etched in my mind forever. It was a Saturday night, the bar alive with laughter, music, and clinking glasses, and I was at the door checking IDs. The manager, Jenna, came over and introduced the new bartender. "Kevin, this is Logan. He's starting tonight. Logan, this is Kevin, our bouncer who keeps everything in check." Logan was a bit taller than me, with dark, slightly messy hair and a hint of stubble that sharpened his jawline. His gray-blue eyes had this confidence that made me freeze for a second. He shook my hand, his grip strong, but his fingers lingered on my palm just a bit longer than expected. I caught him giving me a quick look from head to toe, and something in his gaze made my heart race. We went back to our tasks, but all night I couldn't stop watching him. Logan worked the bar with this natural ease, pouring whiskey, mixing cocktails, tossing jokes with the customers. His laugh, deep and infectious, cut through the crowd's noise, and I kept finding myself listening for it. Once our eyes met when he was handing someone a beer, and he gave a small smile, like we were already sharing a secret. I turned away, my cheeks burning, and cursed myself. "Kevin, don't be a fool. He's probably straight like everyone else here." But something about the way he carried himself stuck with me. When the shift ended, around 3 in the morning, the bar was empty, and Jenna asked me to help Logan clean up. We were alone, wiping down the counter and collecting empty bottles in a silence broken only by the creak of chairs. Logan suddenly asked how long I'd been at the bar, and I told him I started after the army to deal with my inner storms. He listened closely, head tilted, and said, "You don't seem like the usual bouncer. There's something honest about you." His words hit me hard, and I mumbled something vague to hide my embarrassment. When we finished, he offered to split a beer on the house. We sat at the bar, and he told me he moved to Albany from Rochester for a fresh start and to chase his music dreams. His voice softened when he talked about his guitar, and I knew this guy was already taking up too much space in my head. As I left, I caught his gaze, and he smiled again, slow, almost daring. After that first meeting with Logan, I couldn't get him out of my head, and it was driving me crazy. Every shift at the Moonlight Bar, I caught myself watching him as he mixed cocktails or laughed with customers. His movements, confident and smooth, were like a magnet, and I hated myself for it. Me, Kevin Reed, the guy who always keeps things under control, was losing it over a bartender with gray-blue eyes. At night, I tossed and turned, replaying our short conversations, trying to convince myself it was just friendship. But something told me Logan felt the same, and that scared me as much as it pulled me in. We started working more shifts together, and I noticed Logan finding excuses to be near me. He'd brush my shoulder while passing a crate of bottles or hold my gaze when I helped him haul trash to the back. One Wednesday, when the bar was nearly empty, he asked me to try a new cocktail. "Kevin, taste this. Tell me what you think," he said, handing me a glass of something bright orange. His fingers grazed mine as I took it, and I felt warmth from his skin spread up my arm. I took a sip, avoiding his eyes, and muttered, "Not bad, but I'd add more ice." Logan laughed, and his laugh was so warm, I couldn't help but smile back. "You always this picky?" he teased, leaning just a bit closer than necessary. I shrugged, but my heart was pounding like I'd run a mile. By the end of that week, we were talking about everything: his music, my army stories, even the best coffee spots in Albany. But things shifted on Friday when we stayed late after closing. The bar was empty, and Jenna had gone home, leaving us to clean. We wiped down tables, and I noticed Logan moving slower than usual, like he was dragging it out on purpose. He stopped at the bar, drying his hands with a towel, and said, "You know, Kevin, You're easy to talk to. Most guys here only care about sports and beer." I looked at him, trying to read what was behind those words. "Well, I'm not most guys," I said, my voice coming out rough. Logan nodded, and his eyes lingered on me so long I felt heat in my chest. We finished cleaning and sat at the bar, cracking open a couple of beers. The bar's lights were dim, and the silence made it feel like we were mental illness. We were the only ones in the world. Logan told me about his first song back in Rochester, and his voice got softer, almost intimate. I watched his hands gripping the bottle, imagining those fingers touching me. Suddenly, he leaned closer to show me a photo of his guitar on his phone, and his knee pressed against mine under the bar. I froze, afraid to move, feeling his warmth through my jeans. "Here she is, my baby," he said, but his eyes were on me, not the screen. I swallowed hard, trying to focus on the photo, but all I could think about was how close he was. "She's beautiful," I managed, meaning more than just the guitar. Logan smiled, and his hand rested on my forearm for a second before he pulled back. "Time to head home," he said, but his voice shook, like he felt something sparking between us two. Every shift at the Moonlight Bar was now a test, because I couldn't stop thinking about Logan. His smile, his casual touches, his voice when he talked about music. It all stuck in my head like a song I couldn't shake. Me, Kevin Reed, the guy who always kept his feelings locked tight, was unraveling because of him. I tried to stay steady, reminding myself he might not be ready for what I was feeling. But every look he sent my way screamed that I wasn't nothing to him. It was like dancing on the edge of a cliff, and I didn't know if I'd fall or soar. That Thursday night, the bar closed later than usual because of a rowdy group celebrating someone's birthday. I was on edge, having had to toss out a drunk guy who tried starting a fight. Logan was behind the bar as usual, but I caught him watching me while I handled the situation. When things calmed down, Jenna let us go, and Logan offered to drive me home. "My truck's in the lot, and you look like you could use a break," he said, his voice softer than normal. I agreed, even though I knew getting in his car was like playing with fire. We climbed into his old pickup, the cab smelling of leather and coffee, and drove through Albany's dark streets. The radio played some quiet blues, and Logan started talking about his life in Rochester, how he ran from his family's expectations to chase music. I listened, but my eyes were glued to his hands gripping the wheel, his fingers tapping to the beat. Then he went quiet and turned to me at a stoplight. "Kevin, you ever done something that scared the hell out of you, but you wanted it anyway?" he asked, his eyes glinting in the streetlight. I swallowed, feeling the air in the cab grow heavy. "Yeah, I've been there," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. He parked outside my place, but neither of us moved to get out. The silence was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. Logan turned to me, and his knee brushed mine in the tight space of the truck. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said, his voice shaky. I stared at him, unable to look away, and saw his hand inch toward mine. His fingers slid over mine, cautious, like he thought I'd pull back. I didn't. Instead, I laced our fingers together, feeling his warmth sink into me. My skin burned where he touched, and I saw his chest rising faster. "Logan, it's okay," I whispered, barely breathing myself. He leaned closer, and I felt his breath on my cheek, warm and uneven. Our faces were so close, I could see every eyelash, every shadow on his skin. But at the last second, he pulled back, muttering, "Sorry, I shouldn't have." He let go of my hand, and I felt an ache, like something vital had been ripped away. I got out of the truck, but turned back on the sidewalk and said, "If you change your mind, you know where to find me." Logan looked at me through the window, his eyes full of so much emotion I barely stopped myself from going back. I walked away, but I didn't sleep that night, replaying that moment, feeling his fingers on mine. After that night in Logan's truck, I felt like I was walking on hot coals, unsure what to do with the fire inside me. His touch, his breath so close to my face, it all spun in my head, keeping me awake. Me, Kevin Reed, always prided myself on staying in control, but Logan was tearing down my walls, and I wasn't sure I wanted to rebuild them. At our next shift at the Moonlight Bar, he acted normal, joking with customers, pouring beers, but I caught his glances lingering on me a little too long. It was like a silent promise that our moment in the truck wasn't a fluke. A couple of days later, Logan texted me, "Want to take a walk in Saratoga Springs this weekend? There's a park where no one bothers you." I said yes, even though I knew it was risky ground. On Saturday, we met at Washington Park, far from Albany's prying eyes. Logan wore a dark t-shirt that hugged his shoulders, and I tried not to stare as we walked a trail lined with trees. We talked about nothing serious. Music, how he hated early shifts, but the air between us felt heavy, like before a storm. At one point, he stopped by an old oak, leaned against it, and looked at me like he was deciding whether to jump or back off. "Kevin, I can't stop thinking about that night," he said quietly, his voice rough. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "Me neither," I said, and that was all he needed. He reached out and touched my wrist, his fingers slowly tracing my skin. His touch was light, but it stole my breath. I looked into his gray-blue eyes and saw a mix of fear and want. "We shouldn't," he whispered, but his hand slid up to my forearm, his fingers gripping my skin. I leaned closer, our foreheads almost touching. "Then why aren't you letting go?" I asked, my voice shaky. Logan swallowed, and the next moment, his lips were so close I could feel their warmth. We didn't kiss, not then, but he pulled me to him, and I buried my face in his neck, breathing in his cologne mixed with something warm and familiar. His arms wrapped around me, and I could feel his heart racing as fast as mine. We stood there, hidden by the trees, and it was the closest I'd ever felt to anyone. Later, we found a bench by a lake where no one passed by, and we sat there until the sun started to set. Logan took my hand, lacing our fingers, and told me he'd never been with a guy before. "My family in Buffalo, they wouldn't get it. My friends either," he said, his voice full of pain. I squeezed his hand tighter. "We can keep it secret until you're ready," I promised, though my temper was already simmering, because I wanted to shout about him to the world. He looked at me, and his smile was so soft I almost forgot how to breathe. As we walked back to the car, he stopped and quickly touched my cheek, his fingers lingering on my skin, and I felt my body hum with that warmth. "You're making this harder," he whispered, and I just nodded, because he was doing the same to me. Our secret meetings with Logan became my safe haven, but I could feel a storm brewing inside me. Me, Kevin Reed, always prided myself on keeping things in check, but with Logan, I was on a roller coaster, soaring from his touches, crashing when he pulled back. His fear of being caught hung over us like a dark cloud, and my temper didn't help. I wanted to be open with him, to hold his hand in public, but I'd promised to wait until he was ready. Still, every time we hid in the park or his car, I felt my patience wearing thin, and that scared me. At the Moonlight Bar, we'd learned to be careful. Logan still joked with me, but his touches were rarer, his glances shorter. I noticed how he tensed up if a coworker stared at us too long. One Friday night, with the bar buzzing with people, Sophia, our waitress, cornered me by the counter. "Kevin, you and Logan have been awfully close lately," she said, narrowing her eyes like she was solving a puzzle. I shrugged, trying to look casual, and said, "We're just friends, Sophia. Chill out." But her look told me she wasn't buying it, and it made my heart tighten. I knew Logan would freak out if she started digging. After the shift, Logan offered to drive me home again, and I agreed, though Sophia's words still lingered between us. We got into his pickup, but he didn't head to my place. Instead, he drove to a quiet street on the edge of Albany, where the streetlights barely glowed. "We need to talk," he said, parking under some trees. His voice was tight, and I braced for the worst. "Sophia's onto something, isn't she?" I asked, and he nodded, staring at the windshield. "She asked why I'm always driving you home," he admitted, his fingers gripping the steering wheel. I turned to him, feeling my temper flare. "And what'd you say? That we're just hanging out? Logan, I'm tired of pretending," I snapped, sharper than I meant. He looked at me, and the pain in his eyes snuffed out my anger. "Kevin, I don't know how to do this. If anyone finds out, everything falls apart," he said, his voice shaking. I leaned toward him, forgetting caution, and cupped his face in my hands. "You're not alone, Logan. We'll figure it out together," I whispered. He froze, then slowly leaned in, and our lips met. His kiss was careful, almost shy, but it made my head spin. I deepened the kiss, feeling his breath hitch, and my fingers slid into his hair, pulling him closer. His hands found my waist, pressing me against him until I could feel the warmth of his body through his shirt. The truck was cramped, but it only heightened the sense that the world had shrunk to just us. We pulled back, breathing hard, and Logan pressed his forehead to mine. "You make me braver," he whispered, his fingers tracing slowly down my neck, leaving a warm trail. I smiled, still tasting his lips, and said, "Then don't stop." We kissed again, slower now, exploring each other, his hand resting on my chest, feeling my heartbeat. Every sigh, every soft sound he made sent warmth through me, and I wanted this moment to last forever. But headlights flashed in the distance, and Logan pulled away, his eyes gleaming in the dark. "We gotta be more careful," he said, but his hand stayed on mine. I nodded, though inside, I was screaming that I didn't want to hide anymore. Sophia's threat of exposure made our meetings with Logan even more intense, but I couldn't pull away from him. His kisses in the truck that night, his hands gliding over my skin, it was like a drug, and me, Kevin Reed, was ready to risk everything just to feel him close. My temper was simmering, because I hated hiding, but Logan was my world, and I'd promised to wait until he found his courage. But the secret we were keeping started to crack, and I knew things were about to change. The next week at the Moonlight Bar, Sophia got even nosier. She made jokes about how Logan and I were always whispering, and I saw Logan go pale every time she brought it up. I tried to laugh it off, but inside, I was boiling. On Friday night, after another shift, I noticed Sophia talking to one of our regulars, Nick, who was Logan's friend from Rochester. She nodded toward us, and Nick gave us a look that sent a chill through me. "Logan, we need to talk," I said when we were alone by the bar. He nodded, but his eyes were full of fear, like he already knew what was coming. We ended up in his pickup again, parked on that same quiet Albany street where the streetlights barely worked. Logan was silent, gripping the wheel, and I felt the silence pressing down on us. "Sophia told Nick," he blurted out finally, his voice so quiet I barely heard it. "She doesn't know everything, but she saw how we look at each other." Nick asked if it's true that we're together. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my temper in check. "And what'd you say?" I asked, dreading the answer. Logan turned to me, his face a mix of panic and resolve. I told him it's none of his business. "But he won't let it go, Kevin. He wants to know," he said, and I could see how much it was tearing him up. I leaned toward him, feeling like this moment would either break us or make us stronger. "Logan, you don't owe anyone an explanation. But I can't keep living in the shadows," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. He looked at me, and in his gray-blue eyes, I saw a struggle. Then he did something I didn't expect. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered, and reached for me, his lips crashing into mine in a desperate, deep kiss. His hands slipped under my shirt, pulling me closer, and I felt his fingers tremble as they brushed my skin. I kissed him back with the same hunger, my hands tangling in his hair, and we melted into each other. We pulled back, breathing hard, and Logan pressed his forehead to mine, his hands still on my chest. "I choose you, Kevin," he said, his voice steady despite the tremble. "I'll call Nick tomorrow and tell him the truth. I love you." Those words hit me like lightning, and I gripped his hand, unable to speak. We sat in the dark, fingers laced, and I knew this moment changed everything. Logan had made his choice, and despite the fear, I felt closer to him than ever. Logan's confession of love and his choice to tell Nick changed everything, but I, Kevin Reed, knew it was just the start. His words, "I love you," played in my head like a melody I didn't want to forget, but I could feel challenges waiting for us. My temper kept me on edge. I wanted to shield Logan from the world, but I couldn't control how others would react to our truth. We were closer than ever, but now we had to learn how to be a couple, not just in the shadows, but in the open. The next day, Logan called Nick, and I sat beside him, holding his hand as he spoke. His voice shook when he said, "Yeah, Kevin and I are together. It's not a joke, and I don't want to hide it." Nick was stunned, and the call ended with a cold, "I need time to process this." Logan looked drained, but when he turned to me, his eyes were full of determination. "I did it for us," he said, and I pulled him close, hugging him so tight I felt him relax in my arms. In that moment, I knew I'd go through anything to keep him by my side. At the Moonlight Bar, we started being a bit bolder. We still didn't hold hands in front of everyone, but Logan stopped looking away when I smiled at him across the room. Sophia seemed to sense the shift and stopped asking questions, though her curious glances lingered. One night, while I was helping Logan carry beer crates from the storage room, he suddenly pinned me against the wall in a narrow hallway where no one could see. "You know how hard it is to act like I don't want you right now?" he whispered, his lips so close I could feel their warmth. I grabbed his waist, pulling him closer, and we kissed, slow, like we were tasting each other. His hands slid over my shoulders, my fingers tangled in his shirt, and every sigh he let out sent warmth through me. We pulled apart when we heard footsteps, but Logan grinned, and that grin was a promise we'd find a way to be together. But things weren't always smooth. Logan decided to tell his family in Buffalo about us, and I could see him unraveling before the call. His mom was kinder, saying she just wanted him happy, but his dad was harsh. "This isn't what we raised you for." Logan held it together, but I knew those words cut deep. When he hung up, I sat beside him on the couch in his apartment and cupped his face in my hands. "They'll either accept you or lose you, but I'm not going anywhere," I said, and he leaned into me, resting his head on my shoulder. I rubbed his back, feeling his breathing steady, and in that moment, I knew my love for him was stronger than any hurt. Out in public, we started facing small reminders that not everyone was okay with us. One of the bar's regulars, an old buddy of Nick's, gave us a dirty look one night and muttered something about wrongness. My temper flared, and I was ready to confront him, but Logan grabbed my wrist. "Don't, Kevin. They're not worth your anger," he said, his voice so calm it stopped me. Later, in his car, he thanked me for holding back and kissed me so gently I forgot everything else. His fingers traced my neck, and I felt my heart beating in sync with his. A year after Logan told Nick the truth, time flew by like a blur, but every day with him felt like a breath of fresh air. Me, Kevin Reed, still wrestled with my temper, but Logan taught me that love isn't just passion, it's patience. We moved into a small apartment in Albany, with windows overlooking the Hudson River, and every morning, waking up next to him, I felt like the world was right. Our life wasn't perfect. We faced sideways glances, whispers behind our backs, but together We were unstoppable. But fate had a surprise for us that I never could have seen coming. At the Moonlight Bar, we became a real team. Logan still poured cocktails, and I kept the peace. But now we didn't hide how we felt. Sometimes he'd wink at me across the room, and I'd catch myself grinning like an idiot. Sophia, who once nearly blew our secret, was now one of our biggest cheerleaders. She even threw a party at the bar for our anniversary, and when Logan raised a toast to us, my chest tightened with pride. That night, sitting at the bar after closing, he took my hand and said, "Kevin, you made me believe I could be myself." I kissed his fingers, feeling the warmth of his skin, and said, "You did the same for me." Logan started playing his music at local Albany clubs, and I was his biggest fan. Watching him strum his guitar, his voice filling the room, was like seeing his soul laid bare. One night, after a gig, we stayed in the empty club, and he pulled me backstage where the lights were dim. "I want you to remember this moment," he whispered, pressing me against the wall. His lips met mine, and the kiss was slow, deep, like he wanted to mark me. My hands slipped under his shirt, feeling the warmth of his back, and every sigh he let out was like the music he'd just played. We stood there, fingers laced, and I knew these moments were what made life worth living. But life wasn't all romance. Logan's family in Buffalo was slowly coming around, though his dad stayed distant. My temper caused trouble sometimes. I nearly got into a fight with a guy at the bar who threw an insult our way. Logan stopped me, his hand firm on my chest, and said, "We're bigger than this, Kevin." His calm was my anchor, and I was learning to be better for him. Everything changed on our anniversary. We'd planned a quiet night at home, but Logan insisted we drive to Saratoga Springs, to the park where our secret meetings began. We walked the familiar trails, holding hands, and he seemed nervous, which wasn't like him. By the lake where we first got close, he stopped and faced me. "Kevin, you're my home," he said, his voice shaking. I smiled, thinking it was just a sweet moment. But then he dropped to one knee and pulled out a ring. "Marry me," he said, and I froze, my ears ringing. My tough, hot-headed self vanished, and I nodded, tears burning my eyes. "Yes, Logan, hell yes," I choked out, and he slipped the ring on my finger before we hugged, laughing and crying at once. That unexpected ending was the start of a new chapter. We didn't just survive the hard times, we built something solid, and I knew with Logan by my side, I could face any storm. Friends, what do you think of our story? Have you ever had a moment where love made you braver? And how would you handle a surprise like a proposal? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think.